Welcome to the JCPS MTSS Disproportionality training on self-reflection and assessment, student conferences, sharing data with students. I'm Dominique Dobson-Penn, MTSS Engagement Resource Teacher with Elementary Schools, AIS Zone. With me is Bo Burkett, MTSS Engagement Resource Teacher for the high schools. Take a moment to write down the case-sensitive bit.ly into your browser or on a piece of paper, and this will allow you access to the links throughout the presentation. Here you will see the 6 components that make up the MTSS department or multi-tier systems of support. MTSS focuses on overall school improvement by aligning resources and support for both teachers and students. We provide multiple levels of support for learners that address academic, social, emotional, and behavioral needs, and produce professional development that is aligned with schools and the district as a whole. JCPS has 3 departments within MTSS. As shown on the concept map, MTSS Academics, directed by Donna Lawson, supports schools by ensuring teachers are providing all students with academic supports with a focus on Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions and support. MTSS Behavior Department, directed by Sandra Hensel, supports schools in implementing school-wide behavior systems and frameworks, including positive behavior interventions and supports, also known as PBIS, and the Behavior Support Systems Model, which is an alignment of PBIS and restorative practice. Our department is MTSS Engagement, and the goal is to increase student achievement by equipping teachers with high-yield pedagogical practices to maximize student engagement. 6 MTSS toolkits were created to provide resources for Tier 1 instructional practices to increase student engagement, reduce student behaviors, and to decrease disproportionality. Here are the 6 MTSS toolkits. By clicking on the toolkit image, you will access the MTSS department webpage and each toolkit. Self-reflection and assessment enable students to accurately predict how they will perform on a given assessment. They have a clear understanding of what they know. Teaching students to set appropriate goals leads to higher student learning outcomes, which allows students who meet or exceed goals to increase their confidence. Minority students and students with disabilities tend to underestimate their achievement. Today's learning intention is we will develop an understanding of how to facilitate the sharing of data with students via student conferences and guide students to create action plans to attain their goals. The success criteria is as follows. You will apply or modify how you share data with students in order to help the students create action plans to attain their goal using their data. Take a moment to pause the video and think back to the learning intentions to reflect on how you currently are facilitating the sharing of data with your students.
So what exactly is a student conference? Student-teacher conferences are a one-on-one forum that allow both the student and teacher to mutually discuss their concerns, feedback, and goals. The duration can vary from a short meeting that is 3 to 5 minutes in length or a longer meeting that is 5 to 15 minutes in length. This depends on the points that need to be addressed. Student conferences can be used as a deterrent technique after noticing a decline in the student's academic or behavioral performance, or any time a teacher feels he or she needs to address a problem with a private conversation. Student conferences help accomplish the following. 1, they help establish clear communication between teacher and student. 2, they help to build effective student-teacher relationships. And 3, they play a vital role in discussing the needs, requirements, and progress of the student. There are several benefits teachers can experience through the use of student conferences. Conferences allow the teacher to set clear expectations and goals for the student, gain feedback and a better understanding of each student's strengths and areas of growth, demonstrate various individualized study strategies, and monitor student progress. Similarly, students experience many benefits as well. Individual conferences with teachers allow students to self-reflect and critique their own work, seek clarification or assistance with their learning, increase their accountability for their learning and performance, and set attainable goals and work towards achieving them. Let's take some time to pause and reflect. Considering the benefits of student conferencing, reflect on your use of student conferences and the impact they have on students and teachers. Please pause the video at this time and jot down any ideas or thoughts that you may have.
Using data with students encompasses classroom practices that build students' capacity to access, analyze, and use data effectively in order for students to reflect, set goals, and document their growth. This leads to students using their classwork to improve their work. It is important to make an action plan with your students during teacher-student conferences to help them successfully accomplish their goal. When helping students to create their action plan, have them list what they know or what they need to know in order to reach their goal. Then have them think about what strengths and knowledge they already possess. Students can use their strengths and knowledge to help propel them closer to their goal. After that, have students begin to think about the logical steps at which they will take to reach their goal, and who can help them while keeping in mind what habits they will need to successfully reach their goal. We are now going to watch a video of a teacher guiding a student through goal setting. Take note of how the teacher is only there to guide the student and not lead the conference.
If I could summarize what Lovett was before, the word I would use is compliance. Before, they would come to school and the first thing that they were required to do is sit down and fold your hands and get ready to receive instruction. Whereas now they have an understanding of their own goals. The why comes from the student now. Why are you working on the skills that you're working on? What are your upcoming goals? What are you going to do to achieve those goals? And then the cycle starts over as students meet with teachers on a weekly basis about their progress within their individualized learning paths.
There's like at least one day a week I'm not with a small group, I'm with individual students, and this is when I do my conferencing. I let them know 2 days before. I give them their data to look at. I give them questions that they need to look at so that when we are in the conference, I'm not doing all the talking. I need for them to talk to me about their data, and then we talk about where they want to be, where they need to be, how we get there. One of the things we know we really needed to ask them was, how does your data make you feel? Now that I've shown you where you started and where you've come from, how you feel. And a lot of times, students will let you know, hey, I'm excited about it. Or, even though I went down a little bit, I see where I need to make that improvement, because that's the point of the conference. You want them to be able to tell you. The other hiccup we had was the design of the sheet. You want to make sure that it's not super fancy or difficult, just something plain where you can just record the data and the student is able to read the data. That's the most important thing. The sheet is really not for us, even though we're recording on it, but you're sharing it with your student. So you don't want them to be overwhelmed. You want them to be able to read the numbers and know what it means to them. The key too is making sure that you have a day, having mapped out what students you want to see. So Monday, we do whole group. And so that's a day that I do some of my conferencing. Then I pick some students and I let them know Thursday of the previous week, because I try to give them time. The more you can look at their data and see they've progressed, the better you can plan. Because then if you have students that are high, you want to be able to plan to keep that student progressing and keep their interest. So, that's the key with the conferencing. When you say how has it changed, wow, a lot. I mean, attendance has been, I think this year I've had the highest attendance in all the years that I've taught. These kids come to school sick. I'm like, you came to school sick? I'm not staying home. I'm not missing. So to hear a student say, I want to be here, and our phrase is for the kids to love it and love it, that's exactly what we see.
In the video, we saw the teacher create a clear timeline to have her conferences. Students are presented with their data and expectations a day or so ahead of time. This allows for the students to be able to do most of the talking around their own data and provide a reflection. The teacher works with the student to identify and articulate their strengths and needs. There is a collaborative effort surrounded around developing a goal with their data and formulating an action plan to help the student reach their goal or goals. Here is a student conference checklist to help you when you are starting to implement your student conferences in your classroom. You can use this student conference checklist to start implementation immediately. The checklist is also available via a link on the resource slide. We will now watch a secondary student conference.
With student conferences, I like to let the student kind of take the lead on that, tell me how they're feeling, maybe identify the problem, and then come up with some solutions together. That way the student feels involved and they're being responsible for their actions. Well, I remember what it was like for me as a student and when I had to have a student conference with my teacher. So I try to let the student know that, hey, I empathize with you, but this is what is and isn't going to happen in the classroom. The students respond well with the student conferencing. At first, it was seen as just like a punitive measure, but once you get inside the conference and actually start talking to them about why you called them out, they realize, whew, I'm not in trouble after all. It's just a teacher-student check-in.
I like when she calls me out of class for a conference because it makes me feel more comfortable than having to get called out in class.
I think both parties, the teacher and student, benefit from it. It helps establish the culture around the school, especially if more teachers or educators used it. The students are very receptive to it. Typically, I may conduct several student conferences a week, and those are positive and negative ones. It's just kind of either to check in with the student as a follow-up, or maybe there's been some kind of behavior that needs to be addressed at that time. If the student and the teacher are both upset, maybe conduct the student conference later that day or the next day to make sure both parties are rational and can make an informed decision about the behavior and what the expectation is.
Some of the takeaways from the video are your conferences don't have to only be academic focused. Conferences can also be used as a respectful and positive way to address individual student behaviors. Conferences are a chance for the teacher to meet with an individual student. Here are some questions to ponder. Are the majority of your conferences used to address academic issues, behavior issues, or both? Are they formal or informal? Are your conferences proactive or reactive? Are your conferences intentional, or are they happening spur of the moment? And are they timely? Now that you have viewed a student conference in action, take a moment to summarize what you have learned so far. Think about what you would like to change and or add to your conferences when sharing data with your students in order for them to goal set.
There are several different types of conferences you can use to achieve your desired result: feedback conferences, reflection conferences, and assessment conferences. Feedback conferences allow teachers to focus on specific skills that the student is missing, ask students to give feedback on where they are struggling, provide targeted one-on-one attention and explicit help with the strategy, encourage students to embrace the idea that mistakes are part of learning, and set up a classroom culture where every student must be humble enough to admit that they are still struggling in some area of instruction. In addition, feedback conferences allow the student to guide the process while at the same time tap into the teacher's expertise. Reflection conferences provide opportunities for the following. 1, instead of telling students what to do, the goal is to draw out student reflection. 2, the teacher uses a series of reflective questions to lead students through a process of metacognition and into setting and monitoring goals. And 3, as the year progresses, the teacher asks fewer follow-up questions and the students begin sharing how they are doing without the aid of pre-chosen questions. The last variation of conferences that we will discuss are assessment conferences. Unlike the reflection conference, the focus with assessment conferences is less about reflecting on the process and more about students judging their own mastery of the content. Some methods use standards-based grading grids as a way to figure out the level of mastery on particular standards. This chart summarizes each type of conference in terms of the focus, the role of the student, the role of the teacher, the role it plays in cultivating a growth mindset, and further application. Because you have access to this presentation, it is included for you to reference in the future. For a final reflection task, please take time to list 3 things that you've learned, 2 things that you will implement, and 1 thing you still have questions about. Please pause the video now. As always, with any HYP or strategy we use, we have to take into account culturally responsive, ECE, and deeper learning considerations. For student conferences to be culturally responsive, it should use measures of success that validate the population being assessed, integrate performance assessments, employ curriculum-based assessments that are culturally responsive, adopt a growth mindset to learning, utilize open-ended statements to allow for self-reflective practice, and provide students with rigorous grade level instruction. Some exceptional child education considerations for self-reflection and assessment are as follows. Increase the opportunities for students to display problem-solving skills. Use explicit instruction, guided practice, and model how-to strategies for problem-solving. Teach students how to set goals and allow students to evaluate their learning. And lastly, some deeper learning considerations for self-reflection and assessment. Students must be taught to measure their own progress and determine next steps through tracking goals, self-reflection, self-assessment rubrics, checklists, and/or reflective journals. All of these strategies help students answer the following questions: what have I learned? Where am I struggling? And what's next? In order to help with implementing student conferences, we have provided you with the Plan, Do, Study, Act, or PDSA tool, which is linked to this slide. During an upcoming PLC, be sure to discuss ways to implement student conferences within your instruction. If you want to learn more about student conferences, please access the following resources. And thank you for joining us to learn more about student conferences. If you would like to learn more information about the MTSS toolkits and other high yield practices, please visit our website by clicking on the link.